Good afternoon, Tuscaloosa. How are you doing, Internet world? West Alabama, right here in downtown Northport, just a mile or two away from Bryant-Denny Stadium. You're watching the Joe Gaither Show right here on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com. You're listening to us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and on Amazon. Of course, you can always find us on BamaCentral.com. I am Joe Gaither, and we're a proud part of the Bama Central Broadcasting Network. It's Football Friday. And before we get into Football Friday, we want to encourage you to follow our friends at Blue Collar Unplugged, the other Bama Central Broadcasting Network podcast, as they're talking all things Alabama basketball. There's going to be some news coming out pretty soon as Blake Byler is over in Coleman Coliseum talking to head coach Nate Oates as the guys have a little bit of a weekend off, and then they're going to be playing Arkansas State. But you're going to want to pay attention to BamaCentral.com because there is a suspension on the basketball team that Blake Byler is about to be writing about. So you want to follow it at Blue Collar Unplugged at BamaCentral.com. We've had a lot of fun this week talking to a lot of different people. We talked to Martin Houston, Alabama fullback in the early 90s. We talked to two writers from UGAsports.com. We found Josh in Dothan from his crazy reaction after the Iron Bowl, the Milrow Miracle. Look, we're all getting all set up for the SEC Championship tomorrow at 3 o'clock in Atlanta. It's gonna be a blast. You'll be able to cover or follow all the coverage right here on Bama Central and BamaCentral.com. So what will we do on a Friday? It's going to be Football Friday. We've got our friends Katie Windham, and I think it's just going to be Katie. I'm not real sure what that button is doing, Joe. What's going on? But that's all right. I think Katie's with us there. So we will bring Katie in. Austin Hannon is taking a day off. He is going to the movies. So we're going to ask Katie who we think. I bet you that means that she's frozen. Because she hasn't moved a single second. We'll get her back involved. We'll get her back involved in there she is. Yes. Now I see her moving a little bit. But no, Austin is taking the day off. So it's just going to be Katie and myself, unless we have any other Bama Central crew members jump in and join us. Everybody got the link, but we'll see if any of them show up. So without further ado, Katie's switching over to the right spot, and so that is A-okay. We'll get her lined up. I want to hear about last weekend's, oh my gosh, the Milrow Miracle. I want to hear about it from Katie Windham, who was there in Jordan-Hare Stadium, and I want to hear about really everything that's going on in SEC Champion. There she is. She looks great, right out of the shower, ready for a Friday. Katie Windham, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Joe. Sorry, I don't know what it is about StreamYard that my Wi-Fi does not like, but
it is all good. It's no problem at all. Let's start with last week because we heard from Josh and Dothan losing his mind on the social medias. We heard from Martin Houston about how hard it is to play in Jordan-Hare. Last week on Football Friday, the three of us all said Alabama was going to roll to a big victory. It wasn't the case. Tell us, what in the world was it like down there in Jordan-Hare Stadium?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I need to just stop thinking that. But I will say, this Iron Bowl in Jordan-Hare, the ending kind of was like others, but really the game wasn't, in the sense that it wasn't Alabama killing themselves over and over with turnovers or bad mistakes. They did have the one missed field goal, but Alabama was able to move the ball pretty much the whole game. It wasn't like 2 years ago, because I went back and watched the game, I guess, Sunday night. And I mean, in the third quarter, Alabama drives all the way down the field twice and only gets 3 points out of it. And if you score 2 touchdowns there, even a touchdown and a field goal, you have it was just a weird game that we're in the fourth quarter, and I look up at the score and it's just like, how have we gotten to this point again? This is where the Iron Bowl in Jordan-Hare is headed. So I had gotten up to go down to the field when Alabama lined up to punt, their last punt of the game. And so I saw from the press box the guy muff the punt. And then I'm like, I'm still going to go down there. And so I was in the elevator walking through the concourses for the first part of that drive. And I get stuck in the stairwell to get down to the field amongst all the Auburn coaches' wives, because they were not allowed down on the field until there's 2 minutes left, and media was allowed with 5 minutes left. So I'm in the middle of a bunch of Auburn's coaches' wives for the 4th and 1 play. And then right after that, they finally opened the gates, and so I can finally get down on the field. And I'm crossing behind the Alabama bench when the fumble happens or the bad snap. And so then I'm down kind of in that end zone for the third down play where Milroe stepped across the line. And then I look up and it's 4th and goal from the 31. A few minutes ago, it had been 1st and goal from the 7 or 8. And then all of a sudden it's 4th and goal from the 31. And I was in the end zone that they scored in, but I was the opposite corner of Bond. So I'm kind of dead even with Roy Delos running straight at me, which I thought it was odd that they had him out there in that formation doing that. Then you want to have, one of your wide receivers out there to try and get a jump ball, but it obviously ended up working out for Alabama. And so I see Milroe, having all day to throw. And then I see the ball going through the air and I saw him catch it live, but I didn't know, if he had his feet in or not. It looked like he did. And the way the crowd was responding in the Alabama bench over my shoulder, it seemed like he must have. And then see the ref throw his hands up. And I just couldn't believe that had happened. But it was also weird that when I was down there at the very end, I just had this sense that somehow Alabama was going to win it. Like, even though it was maybe when it got to 4th and 31, I was like, but it was like, I don't know, this team is just not going to lose this game because they really hadn't. I mean, if you look at the stats, all the stats were in their favor pretty much. And, but just, I don't know. It's just par for the course for Iron Bulls and Jordan Hare under Saban. There's really been one the whole time. He's been at Alabama. That Alabama has just flat out dominated, and that was in 2011. There's been, 2015 was Alabama won pretty comfortably, but it just the last couple have just been really since the kick six have been pretty wild.
Well, let's talk about an aspect of the game that Martin brought up on our show on Tuesday. Martin Houston, former Alabama fullback in the early 90s. Martin, look, you hit on it. You hit exactly it. Alabama was in control of most of the game. You settled for 3 field goal opportunities. You missed one of them. If you convert all 3 of those drives into touchdowns, you basically are having a comfortable victory. I asked Martin, I said, wow, what went into Alabama's struggles in the red zone? Obviously, you have an Isaiah Bond drop in the end zone. You have a Malik Benson drop as well. They were closely contested. I said, what went into Alabama's struggles in the red zone? And his comment was that Alabama intentionally did not run Jalen Milroe. I mean, yes, you saw Milroe run on scrambles and on broken plays, but Alabama and Tommy Rees did not call a lot of Jalen Milroe runs. I've watched the game a couple times, and I think that's a pretty accurate statement. He said that they didn't call a whole lot of Jalen Milroe runs because they're saving him for this SEC championship game. So let's, with the context of last week, looking forward into this week, look, Georgia has struggled with quarterback run throughout the whole year. They struggled with Missouri, with Brady Cook. They struggled with Peyton Thorne, quarterback run as well. A little bit with Haynes King last week with Georgia Tech, whether it was design quarterback runs or scrambles. So with that in mind, do you think that Tommy Rees, Nick Saban thought, okay, we need to make sure that Jalen Milroe comes out of here healthy because we're going to use him all kinds of ways next Saturday in Atlanta? And really, do you feel confident in Alabama taking on the nation's number 1 team? 29 games in a row for Georgia coming into the game on Saturday. So it's kind of like a lot of questions at once, a lot of concepts at once, but hopefully they all tie together.
Well, it's interesting that he said that and brought that up because I was shocked because kind of just the way that game ended, being down on the field and then the chaos of the post game. I really didn't know like what the stats were until a little bit after. And then when I saw how many rushing yards Milroe had, I was like, I just don't remember that. I don't remember him having that much. Then when you go back and watch it and see all the scrambles. But yeah, they did not do a lot of design runs. But you say that, and then to me, one of the key things in the game, well, obviously besides the holding that took back the touchdown, that was probably the moment that changed the momentum. But from the first quarter going into the second quarter, I believe, maybe it was it was first going into the second. Alabama got the ball with 5 minutes left in the first quarter. They drove all the way down the field. They used up this whole 5 minutes. The quarter ends, you have the commercial break. They come back. Then they stall out. And I believe that first play on second down was a Milroe design run that lost yards. And so I don't know if after that they were kind of like, that play just did not work at all. And that, I don't know if the commercial break killed the momentum of the drive or whatever, because it seemed like the offense is just steadily going along. And then that kind of happened to it. And so, I mean, it's definitely possible that they were, trying to keep Milroe healthy, but, also trying to keep some things hidden for this big matchup this week. Because Alabama is going to need Milroe to play well against Georgia. There's a reason they're the number one team, as Saban keeps saying over and over. There's a reason they've won 29 games and how difficult that is. But I do think to the second part of you were kind of asking about, does Alabama have a chance? So yeah, of course they do. This is Nick Saban. This is Nick Saban in the SEC championship game. Nick Saban doesn't lose in the SEC championship game. I think 2 years ago, people weren't giving Alabama much of a chance in the SEC championship game, and then you see what happened. But I think there's probably more people this year giving them a chance. There's obviously huge stakes on the line for both teams, and it's such a unique circumstance that probably any other season, if Alabama and Georgia coming into this matchup with these records, both Georgia would get in the playoff no matter what. I mean, we saw it 2 years ago, but it's just really to get in this year, you're going to have to win this game, and it may still not even be enough for Alabama. If they do, I think it will be. But yeah, of course, Alabama has a chance.
Well, we're all getting set up for tomorrow's SEC championship game, and we've heard from a lot of UGA writers this week. We've heard from Kirby Smart twice. We heard from Nick Saban twice, and we're hanging out with Katie Windham on Football Friday. Make sure you follow her at Katie Windham _ right here on BamaCentral.com. Look, let's put the Auburn game to bed. I mean, it is what it is. The weird things happen in Jordan-Hare Stadium. You go into tomorrow's game. Alabama is a 5-point underdog, one of the biggest underdogs that Alabama's been in the Nick Saban era. Blah blah blah. I wonder, Katie, how much the two 2021 games hang over and influence this year's game. A lot of the players aren't the same. Now you got the freshmen, the Brock Bowers class, the Brock Bowers, Kool-Aid McKinstry class were freshmen in that 2021 season. I wonder how much that is kind of hanging over this year's matchup due to, like you said, you don't get the mulligan. This year, it's basically you win and you get in, or you lose and you're out, or even if you're Alabama's case, if you win, you might be out. Like how much of, all right, everything is all in on the line? Because in 2021, I feel like a lot of people thought, okay, Alabama wins, they're in, Georgia can slip and get it, and that's exactly what happened. So there wasn't as much of a sense of urgency as I feel like there is for this week. So it kind of feels like that national championship game, which Georgia won. I'm just a little like, I feel like every game in this Alabama-Georgia series, at least since Kirby Smart has been here, are all tied together in some unique, weird way.
All tied together?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. Okay, the Justin Fields bad fourth down, fake punt call, the obvious fake punt call. The way that Kirby Smart has utilized his quarterbacks throughout really all these contests. He tried to hide Jake Fromm for the longest, and he tried to hide Stetson Bennett in these matchups until really the national championship game. Stetson Bennett makes a bomb throw to George Pickens and then a bomb throw to A.D. Mitchell. The only two throws he made in that game were the throws that won the national championship game. So I feel like Kirby has grown with every single Georgia-Alabama game. And with that growth, a lot of people in my anti-Alabama circles have, Kirby has Nick Saban's number. Nick Saban, he lost the national championship game, so now Kirby has that juju over him, has that magic over him. I just feel like all these games, while they don't play every single year, the magnitude of Alabama and Georgia matching up against each other. I mean, obviously it's the stakes as well, but even the COVID year where Georgia comes into Tuscaloosa and lost 42-24, something right in that range, it still felt like a huge game. Yeah, so I just feel like they're all tied together and everything is just kind of even though it was 2 years ago and a lot of the players are not the same, I still feel like that 1-1 split is kind of like, okay, best 2 out of 3. Alabama 1-1, Georgia 1-1, and here we are 2 years later for another high-stakes game.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are saying this is a similar situation to the 2012 season where this is probably there's a good chance whoever wins this game will be the national champion. That these are probably the best two teams in college football this year, which, I mean, you could make arguments for Michigan, and I'm not, but just as far as the circumstances that we've seen, there's a good chance that the team that wins this game will win the national championship. As far as if, Kirby owns Saban, I think, well, this weekend will show a little bit more of if that's true. If not, maybe if he owns him, if he takes the edge, I don't think you can say he owns him because Saban's beaten him so many times. And, really that the national championship game 2 years ago, Alabama has a fourth quarter lead in that game. They had kind of controlled a lot of that game until the end, and some, you were down your two best receivers, some mistakes start compounding, and Georgia makes some plays and kind of kicks off their, potential dynasty. And then the two teams don't play each other last year. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot at stake this weekend. It was the long thing of no former assistants had beaten Saban, and I did an interview earlier today for a story that's coming out, or that should come out tomorrow morning, of someone that used to work in football from 2014 to 2016. I was kind of asking him why his Kirby had the success that he's had that some of the former assistants haven't had that were at Alabama around that time that are head coaches. Like, you look at Billy Napier and what he's doing at Florida this year. He started at ULL, or Mario Cristobal has kind of had some ups and downs in his head coaching career with his stops, and Lane's had a lot of ups and downs in his coaching career, and is at a place where, he's probably not going to be able to build a national championship contender because that's just probably not possible at Ole Miss. Maybe he can, but it's probably not. And so I was kind of asking him, what has made Kirby so successful compared to some of these other guys? And he said Kirby was patient and waited for the right situation. And he could have jumped, early. A lot of the guys get antsy, but he waited for the right situation. And this has been the perfect situation for him, not only because it's his alma mater, but they hadn't won the national championship since 1980, but they'd had a lot of success under Mark Richt, a lot of 10-win seasons, SEC titles, things like that. They're a big state school, have a great recruiting base, but can also recruit nationally. And so he has built up this program. Then he also learned under Saban for, almost a decade, or maybe it was a decade if you go back to the very beginning. And so, he got to firsthand view one of the best, and now they've gone up against each other. And yeah, there are kind of threads and connections throughout, because you talk about the fake punt in 2018, but that game was like a full circle of what had happened the year before the national championship, where Jalen gets benched for Tua, and then the next year Tua doesn't get benched, but he gets hurt, and Jalen comes in and wins the game. And there have been these threads throughout. That 2020 game wasn't super close, and I believe it was, or I guess it was, did Waddle have like a big touchdown in that game in 2020, like a deep touchdown? And then, you see, and 2 years later, Alabama, some of the receivers are injured. So it has been a super interesting series. It's kind of crazy that they're going to play this game, and then early in the regular season next year, they'll match up, which will be a huge regular season game, because these teams, just the way the schedules have fallen, and then kind of the way COVID fell. Alabama and Georgia did play that year, but not in front of a full crowd. And so I know it'll be a crazy game in September. But yeah, there's a lot on the line this weekend, and this has been I'm not ready to give the nod to Kirby over Saban yet. And even if he wins this game, I don't think so necessarily, because Kirby's been on top this whole year, and Saban's kind of brought this team not from the pits. It's still Alabama. He still has immense talent, but not there. If people were being honest, after the Texas loss, you could still be optimistic and be like, it's early in the season, this team can turn things around. But then I think after that USF game, a lot of people were panicking and would not have thought Alabama would be in this position. And I thought it was crazy at the SEC teleconference at the beginning of the week with Saban and Kirby. They said, I think it was Chuck Dunlap said that this is only the second time ever in the history of the SEC championship game that both teams are undefeated in conference play. The other was 2009, Alabama, Florida, which is just wild to me because it seems like that can't be right. But when you think about it, Alabama teams really, I went back and thought about it or looked, and kind of a lot of times, I mean, because Alabama doesn't really lose a lot of non-conference games, so their one losses come in conference play, and the fact that this team managed to go through this SEC slate unscathed is really impressive, and obviously what Georgia's done overall for the last 3 years has been super impressive.
You were exactly right. It was a Jalen Waddle 90-yard touchdown, 90-yard touchdown in that 2020 game that really kind of broke things wide open. So I'll ask you, Katie, you set up a little bit about the undefeated SEC seasons for both parties, both sides. What I asked the UGA Sports guys, the UGAsports.com guys, how does this schedule, the Georgia schedule? I mean, a lot was made out of the Oklahoma game, got taken off the schedule, obviously replaced with Ball State and blah, 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 cupcake schedule. How does this schedule prepare the Georgia Bulldogs for this weekend's game? They haven't really played a lot of close games. I mean, obviously they were close against Auburn on the road. They were close a little bit against Missouri, 3-4 weeks ago at home. But otherwise, they've beaten the brakes off of most of their opponents. So how prepared is Georgia to play what might be a very close game for 60 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly haven't faced the adversity that Alabama's faced this season. And even the guy I was talking to earlier, I think he was talking about in 2020, Alabama really just kind of blew through their schedule and then faced adversity in the SEC championship for the first time. And you're kind of going to figure out what that team is made of. And obviously that 2020 Alabama team against Florida, it was their closest game outside of, I guess, the Ole Miss game that season. But that was just like a shootout. But they proved what they were made of. They were a championship team. And so that's going to be Georgia this week. And they really haven't been tested a ton. They've kind of blown through their schedule. I thought it's been funny / ironic this week when Kirby has had to reiterate multiple times, they did not sit out those guys against Georgia Tech. They did not sit them out. They weren't ready to go. He's always brought it up on his own that he brought it up on Sunday and then on his thing Thursday. But just the fact that, which I'm not saying you don't ruin an in-state rivalry. That's not, but it's just the fact that Georgia played Georgia Tech last weekend and Alabama was at Auburn. It's just not the same thing that whether they sat them or not, that they were in a position that they could easily win without those guys, And so they haven't been super tested, but championship teams, when they face adversity, can overcome those things. And so that's what we'll see with Georgia this weekend. And it's something Nick Saban's talked about a lot this year. I feel like specifically when he's been on McAfee, he's talked about handling hard and how last year's team didn't handle it well and how this year's team has done a better job of that. And we'll see how Georgia handles hard this weekend because they haven't faced it a ton. And really, I mean, you look since 2 years ago, they haven't, faced. I mean, you look at who their national championship opponent was last year. That wasn't facing a lot of hard, but you can't. I mean, the players can only play who they play, what the schedule is, and it was an unfortunate thing with the way Oklahoma kind of fell through because that would have been a big non-conference matchup. But obviously, it's about to become a conference matchup, and so I think Alabama has the edge in that department. Is that if Alabama gets punched in the mouth, they've experienced that several times this year. Georgia hasn't gotten knocked down a ton.
Oh, Katie, that thought where you're like, I have a great next question, I have a great next question, I have a great next thought. And then right as soon as it's time to go, it's like, oh, out of your brain.
I just rambled for too long.
No. That wasn't what I had a transition point off that, but I just this super professional and all over here. But no, I think that look, Georgia. It's been challenging for me. It's been challenging for me to evaluate them this week based off their opponent that they play, the opponents that they're playing, and the amount of depth that they're playing. They're playing a lot of guys on defense. They're playing really about 20, 25 guys, starters minutes on defense. And then offensively, they've just dealt with so many different injuries throughout the year that it's been hard to kind of evaluate, I think, what this Georgia team is made of. And so I think it's going to be I think Georgia's very, very good. It's just hard. I don't have a whole lot of respect for the bottom end of the SEC this year. So I'm beating up on South Carolina, beating up on Kentucky, beating up on Florida. It's like, oh, whoop-de-doo. The Tennessee team that they got to play was a whole lot different than the Tennessee team that Alabama played. So, just circumstantially, I feel like this has been a really hard matchup for to put people's fingers on. You ready to move into picking games, or you got any other thoughts on the SEC championship that you want to give before we pick the rest of the games and pick our playoff matchups?
I'm just looking forward to it. I think it's kind of, I mean, both coaches have said, given the party line this week, about, it's one of the greatest venues in college football, but I really think it is. And it's kind of been a unique thing the last 30 years with the East versus West, and this kind of being the last one in that style, and so much being on the line in this game that I think it's going to be a really big game. And one thing I guess we didn't really hit on here yet is, Jace McClellan's probably not going to be available, but I think that just creates opportunities for other guys to step up. And Nick Saban said all spring, all fall, that the position group he had the most confidence in was running back because of their depth. And so this week that depth's going to get tested more than likely. And so, but I think there's guys in that group that are ready and willing to step up.
You just perfect response, because you triggered my thought, the question that I had. If Katie Windham is Kevin Steele, or Kevin Steele is asking Katie Windham, how the hell are you going to guard Brock Bowers this week with this Alabama defense?
Yeah, I'm not, the defensive expert, but I've heard some people saying this week that, part of the reason they've been using Caleb Downs a little more at star since Kentucky is to kind of maybe get him ready for that role a little bit, which – the guy I was talking to earlier today was saying that he's probably a little more physical than some of your other DBs, and that because a lot of times it's not the problem of who can keep up with him; it's who's going to be able to make a play out in space or to, bring him down physically, because he's just such a big guy. And so the first game in 2021, they could not stop him. They could not guard him. Because I remember going into that game having not watched Georgia very much, and I was like, this guy can't really be that good, or Alabama's defense will be fine against them, and then just play after play, he's just picking them apart. But in the national championship, you look stats wise, he did score a big touchdown, but they kind of held him down. So I don't know, maybe tell Kevin Steele to go watch what they did in the national championship that year. And I think this Alabama defense has been one of the strengths of the team so far this year, especially the secondary. I don't think you want, sometimes Alabama will match up linebackers with tight ends. I don't think you want that mismatch ever happening where Jahad Campbell is trying to guard, Brock Bowers going down the sideline or something. I think that'll be a big blown play if that happens. But I think Alabama kind of has some of the key pieces in place in the secondary and the depth that I don't think you can completely shut him down, but to kind of manage him. But it's kind of interesting, too, because you've talked about Georgia's injuries, and even hearing Saban talk about it this week and Kirby, they've had so many injuries in their receiving core or on offense that they really haven't had a healthy, cohesive unit with everybody playing at once. Or I think it was one of the guys you had on your show this week talking about how there's no one receiver for Georgia that just jumps out statistically. It's just a bunch of different guys. And so it's going to be a challenge for the Alabama secondary. But I'm sure Saban still remembers what happened 2 years ago and has been, thinking about it ever since. But tight ends are something that he always talks about are huge mismatches for the defense because they're a lot of times too big for the DBs, but too quick and agile for the linebackers. And so it just creates big mismatches. And obviously, Brock Bowers is one of the biggest mismatches in college football.
Oh, we'll see. We'll see. I think you're going to throw Caleb Downs out there. You'll throw Terry and Arnold at him. You'll throw Deontay Lawson at him. It'll just kind of be like an experiment to see who's going to be effective early and see how long they can be effective for. You ready to pick some games, Katie, and get on out of here for the day?
Let's do it.
Yes, let's do it. This is championship week right here on the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral, and it's Football Friday. We are going to pick our games. We're only one SEC game, so we'll save that for last. We'll pick the championship games that are of note for the college football playoff. Austin did send me his picks, and then we will make our selections for college football playoff, who our final four will be. All right, so let's start with tonight's game. Tonight's game, 7 p.m. on ABC. Number 5, Oregon against number 3, Washington in Las Vegas. Oregon is a 9-point favorite, Katie Windham, after losing by 3 points to Washington earlier in the year. You going to take the Fighting Bo Nixes, or will Washington stay undefeated and punch their ticket to the college football playoff?
It's just a little wild to me, like, because I have the ESPN app pulled up and they say the line is 9.5. That, like, they're favored by that much against the team they lost to. So I feel like Washington will maybe have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Or, I mean, both teams, like, this is another game where both teams are fighting for a playoff spot. Some of these championship games, it's one team. Both of these teams are. And both have made the playoffs in the past, but it's been a while. But I do think that Oregon's going to win the game, which spread-wise is not an upset, rankings-wise is, but I do think Oregon's going to beat Washington.
Austin and myself are going with you. Austin texted me that Oregon would win. I will go with you as well. It says that Oregon will win, and I think it's going to get them into the playoffs. So I think you'll see the winner will be in, loser will be out. That makes it fun on Friday night, tonight at 7 o'clock on ABC. We don't really care about Mexico State and Liberty, but if you're interested in that, it's on CBS Sports Network at 6 o'clock tonight. It is the Conference USA championship game. Liberty, a 10.5-point favorite, trying to complete an undefeated season. All right, go Liberty Flames and Jamie Chadwell. Okay, we'll keep it going with 11 o'clock tomorrow, Saturday, Big 12 Championship, ABC, number 18, Oklahoma State is taking on Texas. Katie Windham, Texas, trying to make their last case to the College Football Playoff Committee. Texas is a 15-point favorite. Are you taking Steve Sarkisian to finish his season?
I am. This Oklahoma State team, I thought last week in the Chaos the Iron Bowl, and at one point I checked the score of their game and saw they were losing by double digits to BYU, and then I was thinking, who is even going to play Texas now? And then I saw later that the matchup was set, and I was like, they must have come back and won, and they did. But this Oklahoma State team has been so up and down, and Texas obviously has a lot to play for, and so I'm going to go with the Longhorns.
I'm with you as well, and Austin is as well. So 3 for 3 on Oregon and on Texas. We'll keep going at 7 p.m. 7 p.m. on Fox. Number 2, Michigan takes on number 16, Iowa. Michigan is a 22-point favorite. Katie, can Iowa even score 22 points?
No, they will not score 22 points. So I thought you were just going to ask the question, can they even score? And I was like, that's honestly a fair question for this game as well. But yeah, Michigan, I think, is going to win big.
I'm going to go with Michigan as well. Just not really going to be in the matchup, and Austin did as well. No, at 7 o'clock, still in the same time window on ABC. Number 14, Louisville is taking on number 4, Florida State. Florida State is now going to be without Jordan Travis, and a second quarterback just was declared out. Let me make sure about that. But a second quarterback was just declared out for Florida State. Florida State is a favorite still in this ball game. Are you going to take Florida State to get into the college football playoff?
So he was officially their backup quarterback that got the concussed last week is officially out.
Let me pull my friends here who is a Florida State fan. Yes, oh no, it's still in the rumor stage. Tate Rodemaker may be out. It's still in the rumor stage.
This one's tough for me because obviously at this point in time, well, either Alabama fans are going to be wringing their hands about, or they'll be celebrating because Alabama won, but wringing their hands of will Alabama get in, or by this point at night, Alabama season will pretty much be over. And so this is tough because Florida State obviously is playing for a ton. This game, Louisville was never going to make the playoff, but maybe if they would have won last week and won this week, they could have pitched an argument. But with their loss to Kentucky, they obviously have no shot now at all. But then Florida State without their quarterback, especially if the backups hurt as well, I think if the backup can go, I would pick Florida State to win. If he's out, I'd pick Louisville. So I don't know if that's cheating with my pick or not, but
Well, I'll take Florida State, and Austin is taking Florida State as well. So lots of favorites in our picks. All right, the biggest game of the day, or the biggest game of the weekend, really in our neck of the woods, is Alabama taking on Georgia. Alabama, a 5-point underdog. Oh gosh, Katie, are you going to take the underdog Crimson Tide?
this is obviously a tough one to pick. And like we've talked about, there's just so much we don't know about Georgia. I feel like because of who they've played. We obviously that have covered Alabama this year know a lot about Alabama. I feel like I also know a lot about Nick Saban, and I already hit on this towards the beginning, but Saban just doesn't really lose in the SEC championship game. He's gotten the team to this point. I think he's talked about, they made mistakes last week against Auburn that they need to fix. So he said sometimes games like that where you win but don't play well can be bad for the team because then they think they can always play bad but still win. But I think it'll be more they know that there's things they need to improve on. They know they have to win to get back to the playoff. And so I think I'm going to pick Alabama to win but not cover. Close game, 3-point game.
Well, if they win, they are covering since Alabama is the underdog.
Oh, well, yeah, you're right. You're right.
You're fine. Alabama's been the favorite all year long, so it's understandable.
Yeah. But winning by less than my brain was because Alabama's always favorite. Winning by less than 5, though.
Austin Hannon took Alabama to win as well, and I'm going to take Alabama to win barely. I just wrote down 3 different scores, and I finally settled with 30-27. I think that you're going to see Jalen Milroe run his legs off in that game. A lot of outside edge rushing. And really, if Alabama can do what Georgia hasn't really dealt with all year. I mean, Stetson Bennett, 9 sacks all year long. And it's not like, okay, yes, credit the offensive line. I think that their offensive line is very, very, very good. But how many great pass rushing units have they really played against? Auburn got after him a couple times. Tennessee got after him a little bit. But other than that, their pass are we sitting here writing about South Carolina's pass rushers, Florida's pass rushers? Really, I'm not really sure what elite defensive unit Georgia has gone up against. This will easily be the best defense Georgia has played. So if Alabama can get after Stetson Bennett, create some pressure, I think you're going to see some real tight rectums for the
Carson
Georgia
Beck.
Pokes.
You keep saying Stetson Bennett.
Thank you. They're the same guy. No, just kidding. No, Carson's a lot better than Stetson. You're right. Thank you. We're at the end of our week. We need the game to be here. But no, I'm taking Alabama to win 30-27. And Carson Beck only being sacked 9 times. I think Alabama's going to have to get after him 2 to 4 times to really affect him and give him something they haven't really dealt with all year. So Austin, Katie, and myself are taking Alabama to win, and you'll be able to follow us right there at BamaCentral.com in Atlanta tomorrow for the SEC championship game. We'll be there early. Game will be at 3. You'll be able to follow us at BamaCentral.com early in the day as we're rolling into Atlanta. All right, last piece of business, Katie. It involves Sunday. Austin already sent me his 4. You want his 4 right now, or you want us to put his in the middle, or do you want his to go last?
You can go ahead and do his.
All right, Austin with his 4. He sent me, and also he's seeing a movie right now. What movie do you think? Do you think he's seeing Napoleon, The Shift, Wish, The Marvels? He seems like a guy. He's seeing the Trolls, right? The new Trolls movie. What do you think? What do you think he's seeing?
I'm gonna go with the Hunger Games movie.
Probably so. Okay, so Austin's 4 are Oregon, Texas. Michigan, Florida State, Texas, and Alabama are his 4. So he's leaving out the Pac-12 winner. Oregon wins and knocks out both Oregon and Washington from the college football playoff.
It's tough because it all depends on who wins and loses this weekend. And because I think there's a world, we talked about at the beginning, in the past Georgia would get in no matter what happened this weekend. I think if there's not even complete chaos, but maybe if Texas and Florida State somehow lost, that Georgia maybe would still get in even if they lost. Because if you've thought they're the best team in football all year and they lose just one game, but that's like a scenario I don't think is going to happen. I'm just saying I think it could if a lot of teams lose. I guess I'll go Michigan 1.
You're going to be upsetting someone.
What?
You're going to be upsetting someone.
Yeah. Oregon 2. Texas 3. Alabama 4.
There you go. So you're leaving out Florida State. And Katie, that's exactly what I wrote down. Michigan, Oregon, Texas, and Bama was the 4 that I wrote down as well. But I can easily see a world where Alabama wins and you have it Michigan, Oregon, Florida State, and Texas. How wild would it be in the Southeast if the SEC got left out of the college football playoff?
It would be crazy, especially like listening to Greg Sankey yesterday and even what Saban said on McAfee and on his press conference yesterday. I mean, he's going to be campaigning that, but they just that's why I just can't picture a world where the SEC gets left out. They're the most Greg Sankey made all the points yesterday. You can go read this transcript on BamaCentral. They've been the most dominant conference in the playoff era. They've won more championships. They've won more games. I think they've only lost 2 semifinals to non-SEC teams. The other times they've lost have been SEC matchups. So I just can't picture a world where the SEC is not in, but it will cause a meltdown across the Southeast honestly, though, if Alabama beats Georgia and doesn't get in, probably actually the rest of the SEC fans will be excited that Alabama's not in the playoff.
And excited that Georgia doesn't three-peat.
Right. So actually, like from an SEC fan perspective, they probably don't want Georgia or Alabama winning the national title. But maybe at the SEC office in Birmingham, there might be a little bit of an issue.
Heck yeah. And there's going to be a big issue in the 14 athletic offices, the 14 athletic departments wanting and counting on that college football playoff check.
That's true. I forgot about that. Yeah.
So lots on the line this weekend, and we'll be all over it for BamaCentral.com. Make sure you check out BamaCentral.com right now, as Blake Byler just wrote about Alabama's basketball suspension. You're going to want to check out what has happened on the basketball team as they are having a weekend off before they take on Arkansas State and then have a brutal week ahead the next week for the Alabama basketball program. But Blake Byler handling that for BamaCentral.com. We'll hear from Austin Hannon here shortly and find out what movie that he watched. We'll find out how it was. We'll get his movie review coming up soon. But you want to follow Austin Hannon at Austin Hannon _ on the Twitter/X machine. He told you that Jace McClellan is not going to be playing. Oh my gosh, is it going to be a Justice Haynes week? Finally, Justice Haynes gets in the end zone and gives it to his father's old club. Woo, it'd be that's a writer's dream. Justice Haynes sits on the bench all year long and, gives it to his daddy's old school. Yeah, I'd be down to write that story. So tomorrow you want to follow Austin Hannon for all of his injury coverage at Austin Hannon _. Katie Windham is in charge of everything at BamaCentral. Make sure you follow her at Katie Windham _ and I'll be there as well at Joe Gaither 6. You can send us your comments, your questions, your queries, and complaints right there to us on the social media machines, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, right there at Joe Gaither 6. We'll be back on Monday to break it down, win or lose. Monday's going to be a big episode because we'll obviously be breaking down the game, but we'll know where Alabama's going, if Alabama's in the playoff or if we're going to be Peach Bowl bound, just hanging out in Atlanta for another weekend, taking on, who would we take on? The Pac-12 loser, maybe, or an Ohio State in the Peach Bowl, perhaps. We'll make it fun, win or lose. So stick with us on Monday. We'll find out what Alabama did, and we'll keep you up to date, get you ready for Alabama's matchup with Arkansas State on the hardwood as well. So Katie Windham, we'll see you in Atlanta tomorrow. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Always love a good Football Friday.
There we go. It's Football Friday on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com. Good afternoon, Tuscaloosa, Internet World, West Alabama. How we doing? Welcome back to the Joe Gaither Show. You just saw Football Friday with Katie Windham right here on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com. It's time to head over to MizzouCentral. We're going to talk some Missouri football, a little basketball, maybe a little wrestling. We're going to find out what's going on up in Missouri with our friend Matt Guzman. We've had a couple of Missouri correspondents so far, but Matt Guzman joins us today. Matt, tell everybody where they can find you on the social media machines, and let's get it rolling here on MizzouCentral.com. How are we doing today, sir?
Doing well. Thank you for having me, Joe. It's been it's a pleasure. I guess on the socials, I'm at Matt Guzman, so my full name minus the U. I kind of had to. I started that in 7th grade when I couldn't have my real name on username, so it's kind of stuck like that. But yeah, I'm doing Mizzou basketball, football all season long, and you can find me anywhere that social media exists, as well as on MizzouCentral.com, as you mentioned. So, pleasure to be here. I'm excited to do it.
Perfect. Well, let's talk about Missouri. You finished the season, 10-2, and New Year's Six Bowl on the horizon. Would you rather, Matt Guzman, Peach Bowl or Cotton Bowl? Would you rather, you personally? And then give me your thoughts on where do you think the Tigers will go?
Yeah. So I guess a little tidbit about me. I'm from Texas.
All right.
So the Texan in me wants to see Mizzou come down to Arlington, kind of try their hand at the Cotton Bowl. Especially if it's against a team like Texas. I grew up not liking them too much, but it's definitely a matchup that I'd be interested in seeing because, as we know, Sarkisian's gone over there and kind of he's done exactly what they hired him to do. And so that's a very premier program over there. And to see those two match up would be great, honestly. The Peach Bowl would also be a great one. I've heard Penn State been thrown around a couple of times. That also would be a very big time opportunity for Mizzou kind of to show everybody what it's got. Because like you mentioned, 10-2, yet still there are people out there they haven't quite bought in. They're not too sold on the Tigers just yet. But I think either of those matchups would be great for them, especially if they can pull out with a win. So.
We're talking about Guzman. Missouri having a hugely successful season, only losing to LSU and at Georgia. Watching a little bit of the Missouri-Georgia game and trying to see what Alabama might be able to steal away from it. You have Brady Cook, you have Connor Strader, you have a lot of great players out there. What's the one surprise level that Eli Drinkwitz can get to this 10-2 season? And two, how does Drinkwitz sustain it? And basically, what's the vibe with the Missouri fan base? Do they think it's just a one and done, lightning in a bottle? We just had a good year, or can Eli Drinkwitz take it into and make it a program building season?
I definitely think that it's the latter. He absolutely, Drinkwitz can come in, and he has come in. And it's his 4th season.
This is 4th year. Yeah, you said 4th year. Yeah.
It's not like he just showed up here, but at the same time, he's still relatively new. He hasn't been doing this forever, but obviously, like Mizzou fan, it's kind of hard to tell with the Mizzou fan base because up to this point, they haven't really known that level of success that they've had this season. This is a very offhanded year as far as that goes. The last 3 seasons, they finished just barely over 500, 5-7, I believe, in Drinkwitz's first season. Mm-hmm. And so for him to kind of come in and turn that around has definitely been big. And I do not think it's going to be a one-off. And I don't think the fans are thinking that either. I think some of them were very skeptical when he was extended so long last season, but now they're definitely looking at that extension and wanting him to stick around a little bit. But I definitely think that one of the biggest things that Drinkwitz has done is kind of come into a program and make it feel like a family. Like you talk to the players, you tell you, and they're supporting each other. They kind of mentioned a lot about how, it's more than just the game. It's about the way that they're kind of carrying themselves, whether it's win or a loss, they walk out with their heads high. And that's definitely something that Drinkwitz has instilled in them. And so, like you mentioned, they had 2 losses, home against LSU and away at Georgia, but neither of those, they kind of let get to them, and they kept playing, and they finished 10-2. And to get a chance at a New Year's Six Bowl and to finish with an 11-win season is not something to take lightly. But I definitely do think that Drinkwitz I think he has what it takes to kind of continue this.
All right, so it's going to be, no matter what bowl game what bowl game they end up in. This weekend's huge, but Missouri's off. The season's over. Right. No matter what bowl game they end up in, Missouri is sitting right there at 35th ranked recruiting class in the 2024 rankings, according to 24/7 Sports. You got one 5-star, Williams Noiri. What does Eli Drinkwitz do over the next 3 weeks to either bump up that class from 35 to however high he can go, or secure make sure that signing day goes his way and continues to sustain, bringing in the right guys, continuing that family mindset, and it can maybe challenging for an SEC Eastern crown next year.
Absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned that, right? They're not playing this week, so they've kind of got time to see where things are at, especially with the recruiting side of things. As far as signing day goes, like, we obviously know that Drinkwitz has been talking to these players for a long time. He's not just getting in contact with them. And I think that's definitely going to be big as far as retaining those big time signings and even adding some more, because, from the beginning of his tenure and the beginning of the season, he's been talking to these up and coming players. And, he's probably been telling them like, hey, we could use you over at Missouri. Your talents are something we want to bring to a program. And so then for those kids to kind of see and watch what this Missouri program has done this year, that's absolutely something that they're going to look at and be like, yes, I want to go there. And, as Missouri continues, like you mentioned, if he can continue this up and go next year and kind of do something similar, all of a sudden it's going to look like a much more appealing place to play. Not just for the kids in the area in the state, but out of state too. And Williams-Newary is a great guy like that. Luther Burden, big gets like that who can come to Missouri and flourish are going to be huge for Drinkwitz's recruiting class down the line.
All right, so let's flip it. No more football season here. We're looking at a bowl trip, and I hope you enjoy wherever they end up going, Matt Guzman. But let's talk about basketball. You're, 3-ish weeks into basketball season. Missouri 6-2. You've now put the Jackson State loss behind you, 3 wins in a row. You wrote about the Penn State victory on MizzouCentral.com. You guys can read that on the cover of MizzouCentral.com. What's been, the key to putting the Jackson State loss behind you and moving into, the second part of non-conference play?
Absolutely. And so I guess to answer the question, like, it definitely starts with the mindset. And, we were all there. We were present for media day. We heard Gates' first, statement of the season, and he and all the players kind of connected on one thing. And that was that they had a mindset of Phoenix, whether it be a practice, whether it be a game or just a random team huddle. They said that they ended it by saying Phoenix because they have their eyes set on that Final Four. And so obviously disheartening to kind of, especially at home, to get a loss like that by 1 point. Not a great loss, not a great game to be played. But if they're going to truly have that mindset of Phoenix and really have their eyes set on the bigger picture, which is making the Final Four, which is making the tournament again for in Gates' second year, that's going to be kind of what they have to do. Is they have to put it behind them. They really don't have time to afford to dwell on the loss and kind of pick it apart. I'm sure they did in the film room, but as far as moving forward and in practices, like, they're not letting it get to them, because at the same time they've got to keep their eyes set on their goal that they set before the season, and it's still early. Like we talk about other programs in the SEC last year, I followed A&M very closely, and they had a horrible non-conference schedule, kind of turned it around in SEC play. And so I think that Missouri, even if they have some woes here at the beginning of the season, there's still a long way to go. And, what they're going to do is they're going to keep their heads up. They're going to keep playing the way that they've been taught to play, and the way that Dennis Gates has kind of taught them to play, especially that he's new. And they're just going to kind of keep rolling and know what they're capable of. And if they go out there and put exactly on the court what they know they're capable of, they're going to be happy with that.
I thought you were going to say Phoenix, like we're rising from the ashes. We're program rising up. We're going to be,
maybe meaning. You never know, right?
Absolutely. So Johnny is texting his coach at 1:30 in the morning. Matt, what time is your bedtime?
You know what? I probably was up that night. I tend to stay up a little bit later, but I mean, to get communication from a player and a coach that late is crazy. It goes to show you two things. I think, one, how committed Sean East is to this team. He goes to bed thinking about how they can get better, and he wakes up thinking about how they can get better. And the fact that Dennis Gates was also awake, maybe he was woken up by the text, but it also shows his commitment to his players. That it doesn't matter what time of day it is, if they need him, he's going to be there, and he's going to humor whatever ideas they might have in the late hours of the night. And I thought that was an interesting story. I thought that was really cool. So
absolutely. And do you think? Just put your hypothetical hat on. Do you think that Dennis Gates can take this team all the way to Phoenix?
You know what? I think that anything can happen, especially in the crazy atmosphere of March Madness. I absolutely believe that Missouri is a 64, or I guess a dancing team this season. And then it kind of just comes down to individual games once they get into that tournament, because that we've all seen the way that they can play, and when they're at their full potential, even without the seniors they lost last year, still a very good basketball team, and I think anything can happen.
All right, Matt. So let's talk about it. You said you're from Texas.
Yes.
I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee, but we do this show right out of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Monday through Friday, right here on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, right there at Joe Gaither 6 and on BamaCentral.com. And we are proud to be partnered with MizzouCentral.com. I wrestled in high school. There's no real wrestling here in the Southeastern Conference. What in the world is up with Mizzou and wrestling? I look them up. I try to get familiar with them to make this segment interesting. I wrestled through middle school and high school, and I loved it. I was average at it. But number 3 in the nation, the Missouri Tigers, just wiped the floor with their most recent opponent. And tonight, Friday night wrestling against Oklahoma. Are y'all still in the Big 12 in wrestling? And tell me what's going on the mat with the Missouri Tigers.
Yeah, no, it is. And that was something that I learned when I came to Mizzou, was that, yes, wrestling is, in fact, in the Big 12. And so that's a little bit interesting. But, I mean, like you mentioned, they completely dominated last time they were on the mat. And tonight they're going to get a chance to do that again. It's been a great sport here.
Right, with Arizona State on Sunday. Yeah, continue.
Yep. It's been a great sport to watch because, like you mentioned, there's no wrestling over there, and it's not, and back home it's not really a big thing either. And so to kind of come to a school where that's big, and that's because when I was first considering Mizzou, they were telling me all about their disc golf program and how it had won #1 in the nation. And so it's cool to see the little sports and I guess the I say little, but non-football, non-basketball doing well at a on a stage that's still equally as big. But you got guys like Zach Elam and Noah Certain, Brock Mahler. This team is deep, and it's wrestling is a unique sport in that it's a team sport, but it's also individual. And so it's been a pleasure to watch. And we actually do have a writer on our site on MizzouCentral, Belle Cool, who's been killing it with wrestling coverage this season. You can find all of her stuff on the same website as all of ours. But yeah, I mean, it's been a great start, and I'm excited to see what they do tonight.
All right, so will you go to any of these home matches? I imagine as a student, it'll just be like a swipe card, an ID card. Will you go to these matches?
It's part of our ticket package, I guess.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I mean, I've made it out to a couple last season, and I'll definitely make it a point to make it where I can. So tonight I'm actually covering the NBA for another site that I do, so I won't be able to make it tonight, but absolutely I'll be there.
All right, so we've talked football, we've talked a little basketball, we touched on the wrestling. Matt, what else are you interested in around Missouri? Oh no, you wanted to talk. You hit me with a topic. You wanted to talk about coaching searches and coaching movement. Isn't that what you texted me? Yes. So yeah. Let's see. Okay, Drinkwitz is obviously safe from a Missouri standpoint. You've gotten Jeff Levy moved from Oklahoma to Mississippi State, one of our other sister sites. All right, that's already done and dusted. You got Kevin Elko moved from Duke all the way to Texas A&M. What else is on your mind here? Who else is moving? What else? Where's anybody going? Why don't you tell the people some of your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this carousel? I mean, it's only barely getting going. The transfer portal opening on Monday, and just on the other end of the playground is the coaching carousel.
Right. And it's an exciting college football world that we live in. This transfer portal is getting hotter every single season, and coaching carousels are becoming more common. And so I just thought that was interesting because, and I was following the Mississippi State and the A&M coaching pretty closely, and I thought, I mean, I don't know, I couldn't help but laugh when I saw that the one game, the 51-10 victory A&M had over Mississippi State, resulted in both coaches getting fired. That was something to see. But
pretty unique.
It's definitely cool to know that, Missouri, obviously last season they extended Drinkwitz all the way through 28. He's going to be here for a good while. And I guess, like I mentioned earlier, when that was first announced, that wasn't necessarily something everybody was too high on, because Missouri was kind of doing the same thing it had been used to doing.
Right.
But, now that it's kind of turned around, that's an exciting hire. And the fact that they were able to extend him and keep him is I would say it's a really good sign for the program, for, that they don't have to deal with any of that craziness with the coaching search. They've got their coach, they've got their guy. But I did actually think it was interesting that Mississippi State's going to bring a former Oklahoma guy to, I guess, lead their program after Oklahoma's about to join this upcoming season. So I guess I also wanted to hear what your thoughts were on that whole thing.
Oh, well, I think Jeff Lebby, he former Oklahoma guy, but he's bounced around and he's already kind of been in the SEC circles, spending time with Lane Kiffin. He didn't coach at Tennessee, but he coached with Josh Heupel at UCF. So
Right.
spent some time outside of Oklahoma already. He just kind of landed back at Oklahoma. It was just kind of the right place, right time for him to be back there with Brent Venables. And I think he was kind of trying to show that he didn't need either of his daddies holding his hand and Lane Kiffin and Josh Heupel. And so, look, Mississippi State's a tough job. Mississippi State's a tough place to win. It's not like going to take the Texas A&M job where you have resources out the wazoo and you can recruit kids to come play in Texas. Even though, golly, you know this, being from Texas, College Station is a nowhere town. But you come to Starkville, you sell the guys on winning the state of Mississippi. He's already familiar with the state of Mississippi, spending time with Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. And so he's going to kind of flip sides of the rivalry there. The Egg Bowl is a great rivalry. That's the first step. That's the first goal for you as a Mississippi State coach is retaking the state of Mississippi. And from there, you try to get out of the SEC West basement. And in this day and time, Matt, in college football, you can do that quickly by utilizing the transfer portal. And you don't really have to, yes, NIL will be very helpful and it's very beneficial in the high school recruiting game when you're trying to get 5-star players or you're trying to get already established players. But you got to be thinking that if you're Mississippi State, you're not going after the same we talk about Nuari, the 5-star kid that's going to Missouri. There's only one 5-star kid on their list. You talk about an Alabama, you're competing with Alabamas or the Georgias or LSUs of the world who's got 3, 4, 5, 7 5-stars in their class. And it's like, oh, well, if you got one, you got one. We got 7 in our class, and LSU's got 9 and 8 in their, whatever the case may be. If you're Mississippi State, you go after the transfer portal guys. You go after the guys that did well at Georgia Southern last year, that did well at North Texas last year, that did well at these Ball States last year, and you build your program that way. If you can do that, Jeff Lebby, and prove that you can get guys into the NFL, that's the main deal from a player standpoint. Prove that you can get guys into the NFL. You beat Ole Miss. You prove that you can get guys into the NFL and you murder the transfer portal. You use the Lane Kiffin hashtag come to the SIP, whatever you want to do, come to Stark Vegas, hashtag transfer to Stark Vegas. I think you can win there, but the problem is Mississippi State fans, the deal with Zach Arnett, he was rude to the people. He was not very accessible to the media. He was very arrogant in his approach. He fired a bunch of Mike Leach's supporters. And so, you do that on top of rolling out there and losing week in and week out.
Right.
You see you, buddy. I think Jeff Lebby is going to understand the state of Mississippi a little bit. Be able to do okay right there. You're never what's your goal as State? You're about to bring in Oklahoma and Texas. What's your goal? Your goal is to not be 16th. Okay, you're not Vanderbilt. What's your goal? Your goal is not to be 14th, 15th. You're beating Arkansas. You're beating, South Carolina. What do you expect to be? National championship contenders? You got to go find Dak Prescott. Ask him if he's going to come back.
Yep. Yeah. I get you.
But I think it's a good move. I think it's a good move, and if you can use it, same way with Arkansas. All this stuff is true next year when Arkansas fires Sam Pittman. What's your goal, and who are you going to get, and will they embrace the transfer portal?
Yeah. I think you've hit spot on. I think that obviously Mississippi State is no Texas A&M as far as resources go, but programs like that are hard to come by, and when they're found, you either flourish like Georgia and Alabama, or you hit the rocks and it's a complete disappointment like A&M was this past season. I think Mississippi State's at a healthy medium where, like you mentioned, there's appealing aspects of that program. There's appealing aspects of, wanting to get to the NFL and being able to do so there. And I think in the SEC, you bring in a new coach, your goal is to have a winning record.
Yeah.
That's really where you start.
Yes.
And, I think if you get a new coach in, even if he has a losing record, it's not the end of the world. It's kind of expected almost, but what you want to do is surpass expectations. And I like what you mentioned about the transfer portal, how you get the guys that, did well at smaller schools and bring them and say, hey, we have the appeal of the SEC school. How would you like to come and be the face of our team? How would you like to come be the next star here? Right. And so I definitely think that's the goal. For Mississippi State and for A&M as well, although A&M might have a little bit of higher expectations.
Oh, yeah.
Because they just fired their coach for going 7-5 over the last, 4 seasons or whatever it may be. But I think new coaches, and as far as they go, they just want to come in and kind of make a positive first impression and show people early on that they can, in fact, recruit, that they can win games, and that they can hang in the SEC. And I also liked what you mentioned about how, Zach Arnett was not a man of the people. I caught that on just from one interview I had with him before the Texas A&M game. And it was pretty obvious that he just wasn't really into it. And so, I'm excited to watch what happens with Jeff Levy and what happens with Mike Elko at A&M, and just to kind of see.
It's Mike.
Oh yeah, Mike Elko. Yeah, he's been there before. So I'm excited to see, how that goes and just watch it develop, especially with 2 new people coming into the SEC, or I guess schools. It'll definitely be an exciting atmosphere.
Well, Matt, let me ask you something about not necessarily a coach, but somebody in the transfer portal. Tell me about Dominic Lovett. Going to Georgia, leaving Missouri having a good year at Missouri, and now he's been Georgia's number 1, number 2 receiver this whole year. What's it been like? Obviously, you haven't missed him per se. You've replaced him with Luther Burden, but what's it been like from a Missouri standpoint, seeing him do so well on the nation's number 1 team?
You know what? It's kind of like a slap in the face a little bit, because obviously, he was one of the best receivers for Mizzou last season. He had 846 yards, he had a few touchdowns, and he was one of the reasons that Luther Burden didn't have a breakout season last year. He got his 100-game receiving yard, or 100-yard receiving game this season. And so, like you mentioned, the program hasn't really missed him. And that's just because they had guys step up. They had Marquise Johnson, they had Theo Weiss, and Luther Burden obviously stepping into that new role, and that frontline role was definitely huge. And so it was a slap in the face a little bit, especially during that game, to see him get a touchdown and kind of, push that over the edge. But at the same time, it's a good sign that you can lose a guy like that and have other guys step up in place of him and still keep that going, if not make it better, because they did. They're leaps and bounds better this season than they were last year. And, so it's obviously there's always going to be like a what if with a guy like that, because obviously he goes to one of the best receiving corps in the nation and he thrives, where, he was doing so with Missouri, but couldn't really push him over the edge. So there's always going to be that what if, but at the same time, I think it speaks a lot more to the fact that Mizzou was able to kind of rebound with their guys this year and not only make up for his absence, but, go be above and beyond. So, that was interesting to watch, I will say, but it's been good to see what they've done with it this season.
All right, Matt, anything else that's on your mind? Tell everybody what you're working on next at MizzouCentral.com and where they can find you on the social media machines and keep up with all your work.
For sure. Yeah. So again, all of my socials, Matt Guzman. So my full name minus the U. That's on Twitter, on Instagram, LinkedIn, even if you fancy. I guess right now I'm working on doing just some more basketball features as the season's kind of progressing. Obviously not quite to SEC play just yet, but there are still a lot of things to take away from these games that they're playing night in, night out. So don't have anything huge on the docket yet. But I'll be providing those features and that basketball coverage all season long. So that's where you can find me. And obviously MizzouCentral.com, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation Network. You can find me. You can find a lot of our team there and kind of keep up with all things Mizzou. So
who's next for Missouri on the basketball? Wichita State on Sunday. All right, that'll be a lot of fun. You expect it? Look, y'all got Wichita State, and then that's going to be a no fun trip. Are you going to Lawrence, Kansas next Saturday?
I will be back in Texas, unfortunately, so I will not be able to be there. But we are sending a couple of guys out there to kind of get that environment, that atmosphere. It was a packed one last season here at Mizzou. So I can only imagine that it'll be the same, especially with Kansas being as good as they are. I will not be there, but I will be watching. I will be reporting, and that will be a huge test, especially if Missouri can keep it competitive. I don't know. The goalposts might still find their way down on the football field if Missouri pulls that one off.
Ooh, man, we'll see. We'll see, and we'll keep up with it on MizzouCentral.com. You can follow him at Matt Guzman, his name, Matt Guzman without the U, on the social media machines, and read all his great work at MizzouCentral.com. Thanks so much for your time, Matt.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. That's Matt Guzman joining us for our Missouri segment, and that's going to do it for our Friday. We're going to tune out for the rest of the day. We will be back, as we said with Katie. We'll be back on Monday for the next edition of the Joe Gaither Show right here on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com and Mizzou Central and MizzouCentral.com. Hanging out with you. We're going to have a great sports weekend. If you're into wrestling, go check out Missouri and Oklahoma. Tonight, we're going to be watching Oregon and Washington. Tuning out. We're going to get ready for that ball game. And then we are driving over for the SEC Championship tomorrow in Mercedes-Benz Stadium right here on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com. You can follow us at Joe Gaither 6 on the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you want to check out the show. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon. Subscribe, rate, and review. Send it to a friend, and we'll have a great weekend. We'll connect, and we'll talk about it on Monday. That's going to do it for the rest of the day and the rest of the weekend. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll be back on Monday on the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com.